Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the BHA. And it is October 25th, 9:30 a.m. And I would like to bring this meeting to order. It's a motion. Do I have a second? I have second. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is called to order. Approval of consent agenda. The minutes for 9/27/24 and the boat park leases. Russ, did you have something to say about?
No, if there's any questions, we can talk about them, but that's
Okay.
submitted.
Everybody's already seen that then? Can I have?
Is this the notice that said if you don't pay your lease,
Yes.
your boat is out?
And Pam's on the line. If there's any questions, she can answer.
Morning, Paul.
That's
Any questions about that? Have a motion to pass?
I so moved.
Okay, second.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes. At this time, we're going to open up for, and that was speedy, for member comments. And I would like to, before we get going, just mention to everyone the public safety annual chili supper between 4 and 7 this evening. It's a great fundraiser, our #1 fundraiser for the public safety team that Cam puts forward with a lot of people. So if we can go and support that today, that would be great. And I'm not sure, we have 2 in the room here. Did we sign up to speak?
No, I didn't do that.
No, okay.
Just so you know.
Well, good morning and thank you for joining us. Do we have anyone online?
Is there anyone online that would like to speak? So go ahead and mark something into the comment section.
As a board member, can I say something?
Of course.
Betty Robinson here. I think one of the things, and I wanted to mention it because Stephen and Paul are on the screen here. I think one of the things we might want to look at, and there's Joe, is how we go about communicating our meetings, the significance of them, the agenda. I realize we do try and get that information out in advance. I'd like to see us between now and our next board meeting, and I'm certainly willing to offer some suggestions to Tim and Dora. Try and figure out a mechanism to let people know in advance, give them agenda items, and also just encourage them to come. This is their HOA. I think it's important that folks know what's going on, and if they can't make it, that we, again, publicize the availability of the video.
Okay. So I'm going to add to that, and that's a fair point. And as we change and evolve a little bit, we can always use a little bit of help, and we'll work together for that. So typically it's the same Zoom link every single month. And, that's found in Island Report, sometimes on Compass, or online on our website. However, what we'll do is when this agenda is finalized, maybe we can do an extra Compass or something and get it sent out. And that way, it's fresh in the memory, and that helps. So good suggestion. Okay, so we're still in member comments. Is there anyone that has a comment? Anyone else online? Rick, anything? You good?
Is there a chance to ask questions?
This is your opportunity.
This is it.
You can ask a question anytime. We typically keep that within member comments. Otherwise, it would be back and forth throughout the entire meeting is the only reason that it could go on for hours. But certainly we don't have a huge crowd here, so.
I'd like to just ask a question, and it may be covered later.
Okay.
Interested in what is the plan for communication of the potential board candidates when the slate is
Yeah, great question.
Is there going to be a meet the candidates forum, or they, what that day, and so
So we are going to discuss this. That's something that we're going to talk about and vote on today. Great question, though. Of course, you'll get in the island report, what we do is put the bios out there and, you know, they'll most likely be answering any questions you might have about them. But we're going to discuss whether or not we're going to have a forum this year and what that looks like. So thank you for that. Good question. All right. So anything else from?
Just Christine, as a corollary to that, the next island report is going to contain some further information about all those items. The article is in the can right now. I think Kimberly's finalizing the island report that's due to be sent out very, very soon.
It's at the printer, or it's on its way to the printer. Okay, so excellent. All right.
Hey, can I just ask a question? Is that the process we're going to be discussing, or is it the actual bios?
No, that goes out no matter what. I want to have a discussion about if we're going to have some sort of a forum.
No, I was just asking what's the printer now for the island report.
Yeah, Betty, the bios have traditionally appeared in the annual report, which is the December island report, and that I looked maybe like the last 3 years. I didn't go back any further than that, but that's been the time when those bios were all posted. The bios are also posted up to the website. So I think that what has been done previously is that those are not posted until the end of the nominations process. So the nominating committee has nominated 3 candidates. There's the opportunity for nomination by petition, and that process and that timeline is still open.
Thank you.
Any more questions on that? All right, so moving forward to our interim director's report, Russ Curtis.
Morning.
Good morning.
So those of you that were attending the last meeting, I know it was a little different because it was virtual, but I do a summary report called red flags and green flags. Red flags meaning trends that are not going as well as we would like. Green flags meaning that we're making some progress on some issues. I'll just touch on some of these. First, the red flags. Okay, staff vacancies are in the process of selection. We have one individual is very close. We're pending some paperwork, so I'm not quite ready to announce that person yet, but it looks quite good. And we're continuing that process of interviewing as we go forward to complete our employee team. We also have a recent trend of a high number of incomplete submissions to the ARC. In the last couple of months, we've had about 40% that have been submitted for consideration to one of the ARC groups that have either been incomplete or tabled or turned down. So that's a concern. I think there's more we can do to consider some steps to educate, might reduce that number. I know Terry's going to speak in a little bit, and I think that's one of the things that he may touch on to hopefully help. That between that and some of the challenges we've got currently with the staffing to slow things down a bit. So we want to try to expedite that. We still have an opportunity for training to enhance our performance. I mentioned this at the last meeting. Certainly I've identified some areas that I'll be working with the team on in the future and the next couple of months to help with that. I think leadership training, some communication training, situational training when there's interactions with the residents. Everybody looks at that a little bit differently, but hopefully it can bring some things to the table that might help in the future to help improve service and the perception of service. And the fourth one is the upcoming ferry schedule. That has an effect on our staff's commutes. You may have read some information about that, but the ferry schedule is scheduled to change as we get into the latter part of this year. We have made an adjustment in our operating hours. We went from 9 o'clock in the morning from 9 to 4 to 8:30 to 3:30. So that's going to be a little bit of a subtle change, same number of hours, but that'll enable our team to get home a little bit more rapidly because The issue is the afternoon ferry schedule has been reduced. So it really puts a challenge on them to get home sometimes. So we think this will be a benefit and still provide the service to the residents.
That's a good question about that. Have we put in any of our thinking the idea of maybe staggering one person a day so that you get a little bit more coverage beyond 3:30? In other words,
we probably will do some staggering, but I think still the 3:30. The issue, Betty, is if they've got to get home, the way the schedule is now with the ferry, there's an additional 30 minutes that's added to their schedule home.
I understand.
That makes for a 2+ hour.
I was just thinking from a customer
Yeah,
perspective.
but the good news is we have a Diane Maceras that's here quite a bit. And she's, you know, typically other than Thursdays, I would say she's pretty much sitting at that desk welcoming.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my question. Might there be some point of contact after 3:30?
If there's a demand for that, we'll look at that. I can tell you, being here for 5 weeks now, I think I've seen one person between 3 and 4, maybe 2. It hasn't been a lot of, but certainly we'll look at that if that's a demand. Okay, better news, the green flags. The teamwork of the employees continues to be a great thing. I've observed that. I think that continues. They understand that the job's got to get completed and they work together. If they don't know the answer, they're going to work together to try to find out what that might be and get it accomplished. I want to announce we've had an internal promotion of Dora Ritchie to Assistant Director. Congratulations. That's a similar position to the Deputy Director, but we've changed a little bit of the responsibilities. One of the things that Dora will be involved in is training, and we'll get into that a lot more. She's also going to continue at this time in the covenant role. We're going to assess how that works for the rest of this year to make sure that's a win-win. If it works out well, great. It may become a longer-term thing, but if not, we'll look at that position. But we're excited to have Dora, and I know she's looking forward to it as well. So thank you, Dora. Collaboration of the team on the budget development. For a number on the team, this is a new initiative, but I think it is important. We need to involve the team in the development of the budget. I'm not sure quite what the past may have had, but so far I think they've embraced that and we're working towards that effort. You're going to hear more about the budget as we get into November. We've had some discussions already with the treasurer, Paul, and assistant treasurer, Betty, as well as the team. And then we'll meet with the finance committee in the near future and talk about that further. And there's a number of elements that go into that with reserve, with revenue stream, and with the expenses. So we need to try to plan for that respectfully and as accurately as we can going forward. But I'm excited about the effort so far. We've got a little more to do, but that's going to be a positive as we get into that. And we've got a search firm for executive director. That effort has already started. There's some groundwork that's been laid. They're going to be on site next week. Brad Brecht is the gentleman's name who's leading that search. And the search committee that's been appointed is Christine Betty Robinson, Suzanne O'Brien, Slaughter Fitzhugh, and I'll be on it as an ex officio, not a non-voting person. So we're looking forward to that process.
Smalley.
Pardon me?
And Steve.
And Steve Smalley. I'm sorry, I missed Steve. So that'll be a strong initiative. And the idea would be to try to make that selection as we get into January. So approximately. So we'll have to go through that process, and that's where that stands. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Okay, next we're going to have a discussion in regards to ARC and the 6-foot rule. This was put on the agenda after Robert Drumheller, past board member, contacted me and asked to have a meeting. I was hoping that he would be here today, but he's away and in a board meeting himself today. So I have his permission to read something, and this is meant for us to have as a board a discussion about it. And the reason I'm bringing it forward is because I have a lot of respect for Robert, and we had a great conversation. And this is what he had to say. I'm writing to you with a summary of a recap of a recent conversation about the intersection of what I call the 60, 25, 15% rules and the issues of mulching and clearing. It was brought to my attention from 2 different property owners on the island over the last few months that there appears to be some intersection of some recently implemented landscape guidelines related to mulching and clearing and the impact it is having on the 60, 25, 15% rules, and in particular, the possibility of a reduction in the 25% of a property on which a home can be built. As I mentioned, when I was on the board a few years ago, we were seeing a new trend at some houses of clearing and using only mulch on the entire property. I believe we felt that this approach to landscaping was out of character with the vast majority of properties, which leave some portion of the landscaping in the so-called natural state. We asked the staff to make some recommendations to the guidelines that would have the effect of putting some limitations on using only mulching for landscaping and providing for some retention of the natural state. The staff proposed some language, and this was discussed at a board meeting and passed by the board. I voted in favor of this and supported the conceptual idea. I do not recall any conversation at the time that the proposed language would possibly have the effect of possibly reducing the 25% on which a home could be built to lower percentage. Had I understood this to be the case, I would have recommended a different approach to the language, as it was not the intent to have any impact on the 60, 25, 15% issue, but merely to put some limitations on overusing mulching. It appears that at some point after the language was adopted that a consensus emerged that the language, and he said see attached, which I have a printout, if anybody, I can send it one, did indeed have possible impact, and the ARC began to include this in the review process. I am wondering if this was simply a case of unintended consequences that no one appreciated at the time. The proposed language was approved. If this is a possibility, I would encourage the board to briefly revisit the issue at a board meeting with a view to possibly making some modification to the adopted language so it is clear that limitations of overmulching would not carry over and potentially adversely impact the 25% limitation on where a home can be constructed. Thank you for your consideration, Robert Drummeller. With him asking me to bring it toward to the board for discussion, that's in fact what I did. So we're open up for discussion on this.
So I had a conversation with Robert about this, and I'm not sure where he's getting his information, quite honestly. There is not a 60, 25, 15 rule. There's a 60, 40 rule.
Yeah, that number, I wondered about that number myself.
Yeah. So, and what I recommended he do is talk to Fran about what the rule actually says. With regard to the 6-foot limited construction, we've discussed this before. I mean, this is something that's been in place. I did some research and talked to Peter Quinn, who was the consulting architect starting at least 12 years ago, who said it was in place 12 years ago. We talked to homeowners who built houses as long ago as 18 years ago. It was, you know, there was a limit of construction of 6 feet back then. So, you know, the assertion that this is new is just factually incorrect. And the 60, 25, 15, again, I'm not sure where he's getting that.
You said you had,
Well, what
some written reference?
he's highlighted, that we've all seen this in the landscape area. What he's highlighted there, which of course you can look at. Anyone in the Zoom world have any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I seem to recall when I was chair of the ARC for like 5 years back at the turn of the century. The rule was there then, but for example, Judy and I built a home on Dowager that had a really steep incline on the man-made dune there at the golf course. And we were allowed by a special exception to go further than 6 feet, provided that we restore it.
No, and then you're right, Joe. I mean, it also says in the guidelines that the ARC can, within its discretion, waive the 6-foot limited construction. You know, I mean, they can do that depending on individual conditions.
Well, and then I guess I don't understand what the problem is, because the ARC has always been receptive to arguments of substance, and building a larger home's not one of them.
I agree.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Again, I was asked to bring this forward. That's the reason it's here.
Yeah. I mean, it's
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Go ahead, Paul.
I mean, this is the same discussion we've had since May. I think Robert is probably the sixth person who has raised this at a board meeting. And you know, at least from my reading of it, the guidelines seem to be in conflict. And assuming that Robert's history is correct, this may be a new issue, or only a few years old. And apparently inconsistently applied. And I don't know how, for example, 9 Morning Warbler got 49% coverage. And actual coverage. And other properties are being forced to be well less than 40%. Again, in May, we were presented a letter from Kent Mitchell, who, if you want to go back as to the history, he said let me read it. The current interpretation now mandates a temporary construction limit fence 6 feet off the house and garage be calculated toward the 40%, which severely limits the size of the designs. Historically, this number represented the permanent items left on site: house, garage, drive, deck, etc. Obviously, the 40% should apply to the permanent items left on site, since the mandate of a construction limit fence 6 foot off the house limits the size of the designs, and the original intent should be for the permanent items. Every effort should be made to limit the disruption of the lot outside the construction fence. I'm sorry for the run-on sentence. Kent wrote that. I didn't. So I was just reading it. I mean, I think what Kent is saying is the goal was that 40% should be where the house and the driveway are, and any other permanent items. I think Robert's raising that the rule that he believes may have been inappropriately written to solve one problem, caused another problem, that the 6 feet is now being taken from the 40% as opposed to the 60%. And I think it's probably something that we ought to look to redraft and approve in November. But I think today we could probably give some guidance to the ARC, because whatever the rule is, it is confusing. And secondly, it's being inconsistently applied. And I don't know whether that's one ARC. I mean, sometimes it's in one ARC and it may be from one ARC to the other. So that's what I find. And again, we've been hearing about this, I think, at every meeting since May from a number of property owners.
Yeah, so Paul, we definitely agree that this is a subject that seems to come up for me weekly, emails, phone calls, meetings about this. So I'm hearing that this has been around forever. And then I have people that have been building on the island, for some of the builders that have been here for a long time, that, stay kind of in the background silent because they don't want to be recognized complaining, but also have brought it up saying that this is relatively new. So I walk around confused about this, why there's so many people speaking about it here recently. And saying within the last 2 years. And so John's saying that, what did you say? at least 12 years or whatever.
Well, Peter Quinn, what Peter Quinn said about this is, look, the rule's been there since he's been associated with the ARC. He said it used not to come up because most of the lots that were built on in earlier times were the larger lots. And if it's a larger lot, you're unlikely to run up against the setback line when you're trying to, you know, figure out what your 40% is. On these smaller lots that are left, yeah, you're more likely to run into that because, you know, people are trying to put the largest house they can on the lot that is available to them, which is understandable. But I mean, and I don't see any inconsistency between the two ARCs on the implementation of this. I mean, it's a standard thing that is checked by Fran and ARC specialists when they go through their checklist. You know, Paul identified one lot, one house, which we've discussed ad nauseum, where the 40% was not, I mean, it was not calculated correctly, just to cut through it. And there was an early recognition in the review process that the limits of construction were not properly drawn. A note was sent to the designer, and in the busy work of the ARC in getting ready, they didn't follow up. So that one got through, I agree. But that does not mean that it's, you know, it's like 50% of them are wrong. And, you know, I mean, you found the one example, Paul.
Well, Terry.
Well, it was a glaring example in a very public place on the island, and only had one meeting for the review. Hey, Christine, Terry Steelman has his hand up.
Yeah, we're just talking about that.
Terry, you're unmuted, so you can speak.
Good morning, Terry.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to propose, because I agree with most of everything's been said here, that the ARC should come back with a specific set of proposals to the board as to how to clean up this language and the intent of this. There are circumstances where on some of these smaller lots, that becomes such a limiting factor that there does need to be some relief. And I might even propose that we start to frame, you know, what those brackets are in terms of lot sizes, where there are some established relief points. But I do think the ARC is completely aware of the challenges here on both sides. And I think we could fairly quickly come up with a proposal to tighten up some of this language at one level and provide relief where those constraints exist, such that the board would have a specific set of language to reply to or to vote on.
That sounds great. Thank you. It's fortuitous that you're joining us for a whole other topic, well, within ARC. Are there any other comments before we move forward? Pardon me?
Bill Bourne was asking if you can speak from the
I think Bill Bourne has also raised his hand.
Let's go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Hold on just a minute, Terry. Bill would like to speak.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hey, being on ARCA for the past 6 years, earlier in my tenure, we did not have much of an issue with this 60/40 and the limits of construction. And as John Kenny said, the smaller lots are starting to cause the issues. But it's not just that percentage. A lot of it deals with other rules that the ARC must follow, such as streetscape. If all the houses on the street are, 1.5 story type things, and somebody wants to build a almost 3 story looking home, that's part of the things we have to consider. And on that 6 foot part, there have been cases recently and before that we have lowered that 6 foot rule around walkways and driveways and made it only 4 feet, so that these houses that they want to build are allowed. So we've been making those accommodations. This is a rule, as John has said, that Peter talked about. It's been here probably a couple of decades. It just hasn't been a problem because the lots were bigger at the time. Now what's left is those small lots. So it's causing an issue. Most of the conversation I've heard has not been from a homeowner, but from builders who are mad that they can't build, these very large homes on these very little lots.
Well, I have a couple questions. I don't understand how number of stories has to do with coverage. Those are two separate issues.
Stories does it, but I was trying to say about the streetscape. Part of our mission is to preserve the streetscape. And also, you cannot have a house with a 3 story appearance. They all have
you're the I know that you're the one who said 3 stories.
Right.
The other issue is, again, I believe this has come up every meeting for 6 meetings. Every speaker we had except one was the property owner. At one point we had a designer, but these are complaints by people who own the property, who are our members. And again,
frankly, I don't remember 6 instances of property owners discussing this. I'd like to know the detail on that.
Well, you can go to the minutes of the start with the May meeting.
Well, you're the one who's making the assertion, so.
I think Terry's suggestion is the way to move this forward.
Well, yeah, and can we have it done and approved in November? Terry?
I don't see any reason why not, Paul.
Okay.
We'll make it a priority.
I mean, this is an issue that, again, it's been 6 straight meetings and we continue to talk about it. But so if we can have a resolution in November, that would be great. And then we can tell people and they can come listen to us discuss it. I think that would be helpful.
That sounds good. And Terry, thank you. And sorry about that. I know we only have you for a short time. So thank you very much for working on that. Let's move on to what you're here to talk about, which is the ARC changes.
Yeah, so and this is, I think the board is reasonably aware of some of the suggestions, but I think even for the sake of the membership that's attending, we are in a phase right now where given our staffing levels and just a lot of other forces that are at play on the island, we are in need to modify our ARC schedule. So what we are proposing is that we get the ARC-A and the ARC-B off of sequence of each other, because currently they are back to back, which becomes a really difficult challenge for the staff to get through the application process review and all of the technical reviews. And so starting this month, we are proposing that ARC-B be held in November, skip December, and then start up again in January in an alternating month until things normalize a bit. And then ARC-A will skip November, have meeting in December, and then be back in February in these alternating months. We believe this will help prioritize and get the applications in a condition that are more readily processable by the two ARCs, to get them through the process more smoothly and more quickly, which ultimately is, I think, everybody's goal here. Clearly, we are going to need to prioritize applications that are complete and thorough. We have had in recent months a lot of incomplete applications, or applications that are not at a level that they should be moved up to the ARC, and so we're trying to improve that by prioritizing completion. In addition to that, we've had a session with a number of architects, builders, designers recently, talk about how to improve this process. And our plan now is early in the new year to have another session that is much more targeted on the things that people need to focus on to get the homeowners through this process more quickly and more smoothly. We appreciate the frustration that comes through this. In the end, our goal is to help the homeowners get their homes built within the boundaries of the design guidelines. I think the tricky part is getting these submissions within the boundaries of the guidelines. So we're going to set up what we're characterized as an educational session. It may take more than one. And then to complete that, as new designers and or architects come onto the island, we're contemplating having an orientation session with them. Many times our challenges are people who haven't worked on the island before and or very long, really struggling to get through the process in a smooth way, which becomes a frustration for both the homeowners as well as the staff and the ARCs. So these are all proposals that we believe ultimately help us through a current crunch, but also will improve the process for everybody involved long term. That's all I had.
Yeah, that's all great, Terry. And again, thank you so much for your expertise, but also your time. For those that don't know, Terry, he does have a job, very full-time job, but he gives and gives to us, and we appreciate him.
Hey, Terry. Yeah, I do. Hey, Terry,
Sure,
we're going through the budget now, and obviously Russ is spearheading it, but we're going to be hiring a permanent director. So these are all sort of tough things to figure out, because the new executive director will look closely at the ARC and the best way to staff it. Obviously some of the problems is our process for getting applications is flawed. And, whether our property owners are submitting flawed applications and how we process them, that's important, but also, are we staffed well enough? Do we need to, for example, get another senior administrator like Fran to run one ARC and Fran run the other? Every time I hear about it, it's Fran is just so busy. So if for example, we hired a peer to run one and Fran to run the other, would that help a lot, or is it? I know it's partly the submissions, but I'm sure it's also our staffing.
Well, Paul, I think the issue is not as much. I think there absolutely is an issue of staffing. I think the critical point is having enough people who have enough familiarity with the guidelines to actually do the technical review. Whether or not that is two coordinators, which I can see the pro and con of that. The pro is it cuts the work in half for a senior person. The negative is, the risk of two different interpretations of things, which we never want to have. I think the critical point is whether or not it's two coordinators or really skilled staff that have the expertise to be able to do the review. I mean, we have had a number of suggestions about how to improve the application process, whether or not it has to be in, on paper or it can be electronic. Those are things that I do think will also improve the process, that are, in discussion now that need to be advanced even further. I don't know if that fully answers your question or not. But
no, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not pretending to be an expert, but to me, it sounds like there are three parts of the solution. One is better education and enforcement of the application process from our property owners. The second is probably improving our technology as we receive it and use it internally, and then the third is staffing. So I'm far from saying staffing is the only problem, but
I agree with you. It's all three.
Okay, yeah. As we get into the budget, that's why I think it's critically important that we need to. Again, it's going to be really hard for us. The new executive director has to put his or her stamp on the organization and how they want the organization to run. But we just need to think about it as we plan for the budget for 25.
Sure. Paul, I appreciate you mentioning technology because we are still in a hard copy universe for all of this material. And as I think somebody raised in our last session, most of the rest of our universe functions on electronics. So I do think technology will be an issue that we have to anticipate and budget for.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make
Joe, you're on mute. Joe's on mute. He's speaking, but on mute.
This is Betty Robinson. I just want to make a comment. We did have just a brief touch on including some technology solutions in our upcoming budget. So just so people aren't surprised by that. We haven't defined it, but we said we probably need it. And the second thing is, I think a way to look at this is, Russ pointed out, we've got a statistic that points to how much rework is necessary because we don't have a complete and smooth process. So I would really encourage us to look at the process elements and that statistic. If we can drive that statistic down to 5%, we're going to have a much more efficient and timely execution.
All right, any other comments, Joe? Unmute. Joe, you need to unmute. Let me see. We're going to miss the whole thing.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's better.
It seems to me that we need an effort longer term to update, revise, simplify the language of the guidelines, and making a bunch of little changes and then risking getting into having those in conflict with people's interpretation might be something we ought to address early.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Joe. Any other comments?
Wait, Joe, can you say that again? I want to make sure I understand.
All these changes that we're talking about, schedules, okay, is logistics, but education and orientation, the backbone of that is the ARC guidelines. Are they in a state that they will consistently tolerate this re-education effort?
Okay, to me that makes sense. I agree.
I think Terry touched on that so far as, I mentioned to Terry yesterday when I was talking to him, I think if we just had a guide, like the book for dummies, you know, how there were so many different computers, photography, whatever. I mean, I'm serious, just make it so simplistic, have a short, guidelines book and, you know, you can giggle about it, but I'm telling you, if you just make things so straightforward to where, I mean, to mess up would be a big problem if, we just cleaned it up, cleaned the language up, make it more straightforward. And I think that, Terry kind of agrees with that, and that's something we'll work towards.
The problem that I see with this is right now we're in a situation where we are restricted in the number of submissions we can handle on a monthly basis because we don't have a Chris Howard, we don't have a Katie. We, you know, I mean, Fran is doing this by herself with help as Dora has time and Kim has time, but
Correct.
so an effort to go rewrite the guidelines on top of trying to keep up with the submissions on a monthly basis, I'm not sure that is realistic at this point. When the ARC is staffed up to a level that, you know, the ongoing submissions can be dealt with the way they need to be, then I agree, you know, that's an admirable goal to simplify things. I just don't think, you know, if we're talking about doing that between now and February, March, I don't see how that happens. I don't see where that resource comes that can rewrite.
Yeah, I agree totally with your assessment, but I just don't think we want to lose the backbone of this.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point.
I just wanted to make sort of a miscellaneous comment and a suggestion. I actually had, after our last board meeting, someone approach me, and they've been part of this ARC review process. And they had quite a lot to say about, from a customer perspective, what it was like. They also happened to be a Six Sigma efficiency individual from GE. And they had some suggestions about how we go about looking at the design guidelines and, quite frankly, trying to even simplify its organization, better define information in the guidelines such that it could be included in letters to the customers. And I'd like to suggest that maybe I pursue a little bit more of that conversation with that individual and possibly with Terry to see if is this actually a viable external resource who has been trained in this kind of activity, who would volunteer to offer some recommendations.
Okay. Terry? Excuse me, my voice isn't working. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, to cycle back to Joe's point, because I think there is, and I've made this point in the past, the guidelines have morphed over the years. Their chassis was important and still intact, but the series of incremental modifications have created some of the confusion. The merger of the stage 1 and stage 2 guidelines was also another moment in time where they kind of got slightly morphed. I think we are at a point now where a clean rewrite is worth considering, and something that I volunteered to help spearhead. But clearly, this is pretty time consuming, and I completely agree that it'd be hard to take it on in the next 4 or 5 months. But I think it is a really important point and something that needs to be done.
Agreed, and the education.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, anything else to add, Terry? Again, I know you do have.
No, I've gotta jump back in a meeting, but I appreciate the opportunity today.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Okay, take
Nice
care.
weekend.
Bye.
I've got one last.
Oh, okay. Oh, you mentioned all that, right? Do we need to vote on it? Oh, okay.
Vote on
Yeah,
what?
The new ARC schedule, the temporary ARC schedule.
Before we get to that though, so on the 16th, we had a meeting with Terry and Dave Pacina, Russ and Christine and myself. to talk about, you know, what we do going forward with regard to the ARC. And were you, and you, I'm sorry, Ben, yes, you.
Yeah.
But you were on the call, right? Yeah, you were on the call. Yeah. Anyway, I saw the letter that was produced based on the input from Terry and Dave, and the feedback I got from Dave and Terry was that it doesn't incorporate their feedback. So it's very generic. It does not communicate to the members that there's a hard upper limit on the number of submissions that can be handled in the next X months until we're staffed back up and the new staff are trained. I don't think it sets the expectation appropriately with the members.
Okay, we have a new letter to share. That's what
Okay.
Because I was trying to, I feel like it did, but we'll take a look at that. Did we print that out for everyone today? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay. And we'll share that, but can we go ahead and, does someone have a motion to incorporate these ARC changes?
Just a point of clarification, what's the proposed duration if these are temporary? What's the start and end date?
Okay, so through March 21st. So 12/6, 12/2/7 for A, and B is November 15th, January 17th, and March 31st.
And obviously it's subject to getting staff and trained, you know.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll know based on how things are going.
So it just said revised ARC schedules through March 2025.
I think there also should be a comment in there about the way to speed this up is to have fewer errors and more complete submission.
Yeah, so we'll circulate the letter. Russ and I and Terry and Dave worked on, and maybe John worked on as well, and let you all look at that. But it is spelled out that, you know, actually completing a submission is pretty helpful. And those are the ones that are going to be looked at first.
And Russ, can we get that statistic every month?
Sure.
I think Fran does that in the meetings.
Fran does not do that. Chris does that. So if we are in month behind on that statistic,
Okay.
but I can have it sent out to you on Monday.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I just,
no,
I just
it
think
is-
it's a good measure.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great measure. It's an awesome tool that Chris came up with. It's just, it's like a very help, but it will be out Monday for you.
Okay.
So
So I propose that we accept the changes to the schedule that Terry outlined.
okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, it passes. We have on here.
Hey, Christine, just it's a
Yes.
good time. Dora, can you make sure, unless anyone objects, that best practices when you have a vote, obviously if it's unanimous, it doesn't matter, it's 6-0. But when we have a vote that is not unanimous, best practices is to put in the minutes who voted for and who voted against.
And I agree with that. We had to go back and try to figure that out. Was that
Yeah, no,
unanimous?
It's not a big deal, but it is a better way to record your minutes. So anyway, that's it.
I think some of you were delayed when I started talking again. How many yays?
Yay.
Betty, John, Steve, okay, great, thank you. Okay, so that passes. Next we have requested board actions. I don't know though there is any.
We don't, it's just, it's a placeholder in the.
Okay.
And then next we would have Leanne.
All right, so next,
Did you want to talk about the values?
Well, under requested board actions, and this is a question for Russ. I know there was the proration. Is that where this goes, or is that in a separate section?
That's this.
Separate section.
That's the.
Yeah, we're gonna do that in executive. For reasons, right?
This part of that, I'll talk about this later.
Oh, okay. All right, Lee Ann.
Okay, now we're to the exciting part, the financials. I generally, we're just doing some sheet. Yeah.
Don't damage the floor.
I generally just go over the summary sheet, you have the balance sheet, income statement, and all that to back up where the summary sheet comes. Right now, as of September, the year-to-date income is $1,603,589. The only new comment, I guess, would be the interest income is understated by 7,294. So we're bringing in more money than we thought on that, on the reserves. The operating expenses as of September year to date is $967,124. We are within 12% of our year to date forecast.
It looks like there's a big chunk of spending to come out in this fourth quarter, though. You're talking another, what, 500,000 or so, 600,000?
A lot of the
last 3 months.
a lot of the reserve spending has not been posted yet, so.
Okay, all right.
Okay, the variance on the operating expenses, which is new as the consulting master is over due to the interim director salaries and costs.
You can go down, Dora.
Yes.
We're not in reserves. No. Back up.
Back that way. Yeah. Okay, you'll see that. Let's see. The 2024 fiscal year forecast for deposits into reserves is $195,864. The September year-to-date expenses is $106,430. And then all the accounts, the balances for the accounts of September are on there. Go to the paging report. I'll go with it. Okay, as you can see, we're still we're in the 90s as of collections, 90 percentile, and we are next payments will come up the middle of November on the quarterly payments, so we should be in good standing there. I'm going to go ahead and report on the liens too. We now got 7 people left to lien, plus 1 individual. And Steve, you were talking about doing a letter to that person. Is that something you're going to handle?
Sorry, I was on mute. It's something that Leanne, you and I should discuss, and we can also discuss that with counsel if necessary. Just as a point of clarification, how many lien letters are currently out there unresolved?
7 plus that one, so it'll be 8.
Okay. All right.
But we haven't actually sent that letter out.
All right.
Okay, so we're in good shape, guys.
Excellent. Okay, any questions for Leanne?
No, thank you, Leanne. And if I could just, I think Leanne and Russ have really done a great job. Russ stepping into something that's brand new, and on the budget, Leanne really stepping into something that's brand new. And it's been the quality of the work has been great, and I appreciate both of you on that from the financial side.
Can I make a suggestion for our next meeting, so that will get us into final quarter? Could we start to do a projection of where we're gonna land? Okay,
Yes,
and what might the surplus really look like if there's a surplus?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's being worked on, Russ. We've talked about that, right?
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Leanne. Moving on to old business number 6, Bald Head Island Ferry Transportation Update Docket A-41 sub 23, Mr. Steve Smalley. Updates?
I think we're largely in the same situation as we were last month. And I know Kim is going to also report out in the next month's island report a larger article that contains a link to the proposed ferry schedule. The settlement that was agreed to between transportation, all the other parties, remains pending with the Utilities Commission. The public staff, the Utilities Commission, has lent their support to the settlement, meaning that there's no internal objection or external objection to proceeding forward with the new modified ferry schedule. Until the commission actually approves that schedule, though, no changes will be made. So I know that the original intent was of limited originally was to implement this in I think by the summer. That was subsequently delayed to October. The final intent was, or the latest intent was November. And it remains to be seen how long it takes the Utilities Commission to actually approve this change. And then from there, transportation is free to implement it immediately, but stay tuned for when that might happen. The next island report is going to contain a link to the schedule that has been filed and requested with the Utilities Commission. It's publicly available now. We can also put that up in a compass if that's faster to disseminate that information more broadly to the membership. But it's not really something that can be explained. You just have to see it because it contains the whole matrix on a day-to-day basis, and it's not on the hour, it's not on the half an hour as it was before. And then further complicating is there's going to be a summer schedule and a winter schedule that each diverge one from the other. So we know what the proposal looks like. We know what it's likely to be. We just don't know, in fact, whether that's going to be approved finally and when.
You know, when it finally is approved, I think we should assume it will be approved. We should really take a leadership role in communicating those changes because folks here on the island have got on the hour and on the half hour totally ingrained in their brain.
You're right.
So we need a communication campaign.
Yeah,
that will
we'll stay on that.
Definitely get everybody in sync so we don't have a lot of complaints.
Yeah, for sure. Kim, are you on?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, next one.
Yeah.
One thing that's not, and I think Betty's idea is a good one. Well, we should be ready to go as soon as it happens. One thing that doesn't necessarily impact the BHA members as on an individual homeowner basis as much, but does impact the members who also happen to be business owners, is that the iCard system whereby transportation lent credit to businesses and allowed them to buy ferry tickets on a monthly revolving credit basis is ending, and they can end that really at any time. So, you know, for we mere homeowners, that's not going to make any change, but for some of the business owners, they should be aware that that is also in the offing.
Yeah, it is. That is a big deal. I know. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry. I was. The other news, Steve, if you don't mind, there was a court decision on 21, which BHA is also an intervener. And as sure you all know, the BHI Limited sued the state utility commission that they went beyond their authority to regulate parking in the barge. The court ruled in favor or against limited on parking, and so parking will now be regulated. Hopefully that means with that suit, if that suit is done, whatever progress to sale or can occur. However, I think they're still in the period where they can appeal the decision, Steve.
They are. They're running out of runway on appeals because it would then have to go to the North Carolina Supreme Court. That would then have to overturn the Court of Appeals decision, which is rare, very unlikely to occur.
Right. So hopefully this means that now that unless limited, appeals there, that we may be getting closer to some resolution of that. But it was a great decision for the island that limited lost, and the parking can be under a regulatory framework of some sort in the Utility Commission.
And thank you, Paul. I think that's helpful, and one that wasn't on my mind there. I should also add, for the benefit of the membership, that even though BHA filed as an intervener in that suit many years ago, we are not actively participating in that, and we are not expending a single dollar of legal fees towards a fight that clearly is not ours.
That's a very good point.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And Steve, could you, Kim, can you hear me? Oh, she's probably on mute. I'm sure she hears me.
Yeah.
Steve, could you send that link to Kim? And Kim, if you would, the next compass you send out, include that link?
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, the article's already in the can for the island report, and we can also replicate that in the compass.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. Excellent. All right, thanks, Steve. New business, number 7, prorated assessments. Thank you, Russ.
Certainly. So as I'm becoming more familiar with things, I've been asking a lot of questions about our practices and what we've been doing. Currently, when a new home is built, and let's say it gets a certificate of occupancy on March the 1st, they are paying a lot fee assessment. They are not paying a home assessment until the following January. That did not seem logical to me. It seems like we're leaving money on the table. I'm proposing that the board would accept a prorated assessment policy or billing policy going forward, simply to say that when a new home receives a certificate of occupancy, that BHA will bill the homeowner a prorated amount in the month following the receipt of the certificate of occupancy for the difference between a lot assessment and a house assessment. So the difference is 190 versus 570 annualized. So that would become effective at the beginning of the year if the board chooses to accept that.
So wait a minute, so they paid 190 as a lot. They've received the certificate of occupancy, so now you're saying we want to charge them for?
When they get the CO, they would have a home, but they're getting the benefit of having no additional charge until the following January currently.
Yes, I understand that, but let's say it's September. What is it you're saying you're going to charge them?
Then you would
The
take
prorated amount
starting in October, the following month you would bill. So, and I did a calculation on this. I mean, it's maybe $3,000 to $4,000 annualized that the association would receive. It's not currently receiving, depending on how many homes close, new homes close. But if it happens on the 15th, the following 1st of the month would be when that would be calculated. And then it would be billed the difference at that point in time.
It's a normal practice.
So you revert it to what would be a monthly fee, and you charge them for the balance of the year?
That's one way to look.
So if they occupy in September versus March, it's a lesser fee.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, got it.
Correct.
Hey, Russ, 2 things. I think we can't do it off of the CO. because you can get a CO and not get final approval from the BHA.
They can,
As
they
we
can.
know. So
It's gonna
I
be a
think,
closing.
what was that?
It will be a closing. So what we're gonna do, I was gonna talk about this a little bit later, but it would be just like any neighborhood you move into, if you have a HOA, POA, whatever. Typically, they would send, whatever the closing attorney is, send information to them to fill out, or vice versa. The attorney sends it to the HOA, and you have the closing date, all of the other information, which again, also will help us to complete a nice, small welcome package for each new person that moves here on the island.
Yeah, I understand that. Here's, I don't want to get into too many details here, but a lot of times these, especially new homes, close well before, and then the builder finishes the house. So the change of ownership sometimes doesn't coincide with it being get a CO or final approval from the BHA.
Well, their name would be on the deed.
What?
The new homeowner's name would be on the deed.
Yeah, no, I understand. Again, we can work through the details. I'm just two things. One is I think it ought to be off BHA's final sign off, which sometimes happens after the CO. And this should be easy because it's a new homeowner. It does seem sometimes in the past are issues with some billing as we didn't have the best information. So we need to make sure we get, good information on the new people. But I'm all in favor of the idea. Just need to make sure the details are done correctly, or
Okay, this is a wild thought, but this is such a small amount of money. Should we err on the side of being welcoming and just saying they pay their dues at the beginning of the first year they leave it? I mean, it does not seem to amount to much of anything in terms of real dollars. And is there any reason why we feel we need to do this?
Well, it's a normal practice, once you own a home, to pay your dues.
Right, but I mean, they pay their lot dues, and I don't know, it just seems to me like to send someone a bill for $200 saying, welcome to the island, and now here's your dues, it would
be taken care of at the closing table.
Right, whatever, it just doesn't seem to.
I think it's a fairness issue. It's a fairness issue because if somebody closes early in the year, to get that benefit of 8-9 months, it just doesn't seem reasonable to the association. That's all. So if it's going on for 10 years, that's they can add up for
it was a wild idea. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Okay. Election schedule. Oh, we do need to vote on that. Okay. So
do we need to vote on it, or is that in the actual current? I mean, that probably something that should have been being done for years, right?
Well, it should have been being done for years, but it hasn't. So,
okay.
I think we do need to vote on it.
We can vote on it, but this isn't really a new. We're just finally getting around to implementing what we should have been doing years ago. But anyway, I don't care.
Okay. Can someone give me a motion?
I so move.
Okay. Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's everyone.
Can I
You need.
Can I get like a state? You got it? Perfect.
Yeah.
I'll just take it. Good.
Okay, it passes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Election schedule. We kind of already touched on this. Steve, I think you pretty much completely talked about what's going on with the candidates. I did want to bring up. I think it's going out in the Compass. The Island Report.
There was an announcement from the nominating committee, but anybody else that chose to write in has not been resolved yet.
I was to say it's not up until.
It's not closed yet.
For the ones that are-
It's not. completely.
Okay, but the nominating committee slate has been published.
Yes.
Okay, and we're waiting on write-ins.
Yes.
Or whatever. And then will they be given will they be giving a set of questions like we were given last year? Some substance to write on? And where does that come from? Is that already in place or?
Yeah, I can touch on that. What I did was I worked with Kim and Dora to send the existing candidates or the nominated candidates. I sent them the same questions from last year that appeared in the island report, and have asked each to put together answers to those questions, just to the same questions, as well as going ahead and putting together their general bio and a photo. We'll do the same with any other candidates who come forth by the upcoming deadline, which is end of November or late November. And I know that there were some additional questions that were then posed to the candidates later, and that were posted, I think, in December or January on the website above and beyond their original answers to the first set of questions. I can dig for those if we want to go ahead and do that. It was essentially like, answer these additional questions, and if there's any final comment that you want to make to the membership before the election occurs. That was something that was done last year, and Betty, I'm sure that you recall that too.
I think we did that. I think we did that because we got pushback for individually contacting membership with our thoughts. And it was the opportunity for the BHA to say, okay, you get one more shot at communicating with the members. I think that's what it was. And I think
in response to the improper communications that were sent out, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So maybe we forego that this year.
Forgot about that. That is, I think Betty is correct.
But it may not be a bad thing to say, do the prescribed questions, and then a month later say, if you want to be heard again, go ahead and publish the thoughts.
Yeah,
Something
we
like
certainly
that.
do that. Right.
Okay. So,
and I think Christine's question was, do we want to do some type of candidate forum this year? I guess that was a new thing last year. And I guess that's an item for discussion. I don't have strong feelings about it, but
Yes.
I didn't think it was terribly useful.
Okay, I'm gonna give the opposing view.
Okay.
From the standpoint that, we have so many people who are not here full time. We have so many people who are don't have access to individuals, don't see them, don't know anything about them. I think the more transparency we can provide and the more opportunity we can provide our members to just hear from people, to hear them answer a question, which is what we do in these board meetings, to be spur of the moment, to share what they think is important to the island. I think it's critical. And I can't envision why we wouldn't do it. Can we make it simpler? Can we do it on Zoom? But I don't know what we would object about having an hour or two of conversation with potential candidates. I think it's very important.
John, how do you feel?
I agree. I mean, I can't remember our history on candidate forums prior to that.
No, last year was
I will say, if you go back 5-6 years ago, there just weren't that many. You'd have 2 candidates for 2 slots, so it wasn't so much of an issue. But in recent years, there have been, significant numbers of candidates for 2 slots. So I think it is valuable to let people hear from the candidates.
okay. Paul?
First of all, it's brand new. Last year was the first year. Secondly, I thought the questions were not well done. So if the board decides to do it, I would have a little bit better control of the questions. I don't think it was very well done. we ask people questions, and we ask them more questions, and we ask them to come to a candidate forum. I mean, I'd rather have more of a free form ability for candidates to directly send their message to our members, and we can distribute it for them rather than by hacking somebody's email database. I mean, a little bit more free form. So if you want to talk about one thing or another thing, it's not under the structure that we've defined. This is a sort of a not that important, and we've done this for a few years. I think the whole idea that we ask, it's one of the first questions to describe somebody's education is a little bit odd. Frankly, it's about the last thing I care about is where somebody went to college 40 years ago.
I thought the spouse, if you have, first of all, not everyone has a spouse, and then you're asking about their education and profession. So
Yeah.
Steve struck that.
Okay, that I didn't realize that. That's good because it I don't know, whatever the adjective is, I was not a fan of that. So that's my view. I mean, we do have some time, so maybe we ought to just put this off and put it on the agenda for November for the candidate forum.
Well, since we went around the room, I'd like Joe's opinion as well.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, there's so many people that do not know any of the candidates. I think we're obliged to do something to introduce them.
I have no issue with it. I have an afternoon free. Dora and I and Russ.
Joe, I agree with you completely. I just think we ought to give the ability for candidates to craft their own message on the issues they want, not be somewhat limited by questions we give them. That's giving the candidates the ability to communicate to the membership, I think is a great idea. I am all for that. The structure of just a series of questions I don't think that's the most effective way to do it, but yeah, that's.
And I don't disagree with you. I really think there's probably a couple of key areas we might want them to comment on, and I think we also want to have them have an opportunity to speak directly to our members. And I think seeing the individuals, and hearing them talk is also valuable. I mean, I want to be very honest. I felt last year like I don't want Claude's market time email to direct the outcome of the election. That's just totally unfair, and it has nothing to do with the actual candidates. So I think the more we can provide the forums and do our best to be transparent and put these people out there, people will make their own decisions.
Okay. All right, so let's get together and talk about that, and we'll get back to the board. Okay.
Yeah.
I think sounds good. All right, any more comments on the election or election schedule?
I guess one more comment. I mean, if we're going to defer a decision on this until November, time gets very short. Are we going to discuss it between now and make a decision prior? Because otherwise we're kind of out of time.
I think we are agreeing that
We're going to do something. So we'll get together and figure out what that looks like and structure it and make sure we have some, good questions.
You guys could just vote to have a forum, because that's obviously something that everybody seems to want to do, and then we can figure out.
Of some sort.
It's already voted in, and we can figure out details.
May I have a motion?
I have a motion that we have a candidate forum for the election.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
I'll do the whole thing.
Any show. Any opposed? I guess it passes.
Okay.
Paul, are you speaking? Because you're muted.
Paul, you're on mute.
I suggested we postpone this discussion because it's probably a good discussion, and nobody came in knowing that was one of the issues we were going to deal with. So I think we ought to delay the discussion on a candidate forum.
I think it was known. I mean, I certainly came in here knowing there was a question about whether we were going to do the debate. That's been talked about.
Yeah, that was actually
It
on
was on
the,
the original agenda.
it's on the original agenda.
And I will tell you that we're gonna talk about how this looks and how it's gonna be structured. Dora just wanted to vote on it, and then the entire board will know what this looks like.
But I agree with Paul. It shouldn't be canned where everybody has to answer questions and give information that we or somebody, some third party dictates. It ought to be what their vision for the island and their candidacy is.
So just an open discussion, not canned, Q&A type thing? I don't
I
know.
think we can give a framework of what the kind of information we'd like them to talk about.
This was mainly just a motion to agree that we're gonna set up a forum or an event to do this thing for, and then we can plan what that looks like, just so we can have that motion moving, so we can get it done faster than November.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
We don't have to call it a forum, we can call it a candidate public outing, or, you know, something of like, just an event.
Details TBD.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah, I don't think any of us really want, what it looked like last year, honestly, or maybe some of you do. I'd like for it to be
It was a start.
more
We'd
a
like to have-
conversation
I think, yes.
kind of thing. So I've got the motion, I've got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, I heard Steve, so, but it passes, it passes.
5-1, right?
Aye, if you need me to, yeah.
These are big decisions.
All right,
Did
we
he?
take a 30-minute recess to debate.
Oh, we did?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Did you have any other question related to the process for the election?
But I'm not sure, I guess I've heard with what was voted. I just feel very strongly, I guess, the basic premise of governance in the sunshine is, you know, you give people a chance to understand who they're voting. So
You will have it.
If I to do that, then that's great.
Yep.
Because if time is getting compressed for this process, kind of like the city.
You will have
it. This meeting.
Yeah, multiple times.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for noticing that. All right, I think that is it. It's
Annual meeting.
time- Pardon?
Annual meeting.
Oh, the annual meeting, okay. Yes, I did want to talk about the annual meeting. Okay, so with the annual meeting this year, we just started to really talk about it. We're gonna be in our new building. Last year, we were at the Village Hall. We're happy to be back in our building. We're going to invite pretty much all the same people that spoke last year. It's the time that all of the different island entities are able to come and you know, let us know what's going on with them as we elect our 2 new board members. So what is it? I didn't write the date down. What is the date on that?
It's the last Saturday of January is when we do it.
25th. Okay, so it's January 25th. It'll be here in this building. You'll hear from the chapel. You'll hear from Old Baldy, the village, our mayor. Who else did we invite? Just all the same entities we have every year. Will come in and give us a little update. We'll elect our 2 new board members, immediately go into our very first meeting with them afterwards. And
Do we make a presentation? The BHA?
well, a little bit. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we run the
Just a
meeting.
Small speech, mainly, what's been kind of done before is that the committee that you're a liaison for is generally the topic in which you tend to touch on. But, and you know, you're welcome to add your own twist to it as well, but that's usually as.
Why I'm asking.
It's true, you got one last year. But yeah, it's more or less like the committee that you're generally helping out with, that you're the liaison for, is what you tend to touch on. They have shifted over the years. I've only seen 2 so far myself, but I have noticed that our last director shifted if we needed an extra person to talk about another subject that was brought into.
Yeah, we usually went through finances, we went through ARC, we went through, other, just kind of the committees and what they do.
Okay.
Yeah, so just an update from everyone and, trying to keep some of these different entities to stick within their 5 minutes, which,
Yeah, we need to keep people on time because this is a meeting.
it's difficult. And we've already had a small conversation with this, and one of the ways I think will help is contacting them here real soon, letting them know that they need to stay within a 5-minute limit, which I believe is enough time to give a presentation. And to get any slides or anything like that over to Dora and Kim immediately, as soon as they can, but no later than a week before the meeting. And that way we can look at what they have submitted and know, well, this is going to be a lot longer than 5 minutes, and go ahead and cut that. I know Chris Webb, that could have been, and it was great information, but it could have been a half an hour. So
how about this? How about we open the meeting, we collect the ballots, we do the BHA presentations, we then announce who was elected, and then go to these presentations, and then the presentations can begin. I mean, most people are there to find out what happened in the election. I mean, I don't need to sit through, 10 minutes of hearing about the country club. I know about the country club. It took so long last year, and people really just want to know who was elected primarily. But anyway.
You may want to talk with Lori Jelinek, who's been the teller for the last 15 years or something. The constraint there may be, can the count be assembled that quickly?
I was just wondering that.
I think the reason that we put those two fluffy pieces in the middle is it gives time for the actual votes to be added up and double checked before an announcement's made. I think
go ahead and reach out and see.
I'll
check that. We just need to know anyway. Okay, so any further questions about that? Just wanted to give a little update that we are on top of it.
Did you say at the end, the BHA board meets?
Yes, we do. We do. We bring our 2 new board members in, and
okay,
we can, make the decision who is treasurer, president, vice president, so secretary, so on. We can also push that off.
The last 2 years, and I think it probably made sense, was instead of electing officers at that meeting, since all of our officers today are continuing on the board next year, last year and the year before, we confirmed that the current officers would be in officers for a month until we had time at the February board meeting to sit down and discuss with a better discussion about who should be the officer.
I agree.
When I was first elected to the club board, I didn't know what the heck was going on. And it gives the new board members some time to actually think about it, get to know people, and actually provide real input as to who should be the officers for 25.
And Steve, didn't we have our orientation before that first meeting?
I think he was late to that, actually.
No, he and I sat together.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
There were 2 orientations, one of which was Betty and I just sitting with the director and kind of getting the lowdown from her perspective. Then we had kind of the longer board retreat, board orientation, that all day thing at the club. And Betty, I can't remember what the order of those 2 were. Which occurred first. Yeah. I do think, though, that we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but I think that that retreat, et cetera, we should reconsider the format and can probably make it a little bit more efficient and useful, because I think a lot of that was simply reading through and going through proposals and PowerPoints that had already been put together. So in other words, I think we can probably do a bit of homework beforehand and then focus on the story behind the and as the main focus of that in-person session.
That makes sense.
That sounds good. And we'll have Dora and Russ maybe can look back at last year and pull it up, and we'll look at all of that. And we have time, just like you said.
Just one point related to the election, just in looking at the bylaws here. And probably want to look back for the last couple of years as to how in-person votes and proxy votes are counted and what the cutoff is, because the bylaws do provide that that persons are permitted to vote in person or by proxy at the meeting itself.
Yes.
So clearly we can and must accept votes on that day after the meeting starts, but from there, I think there can certainly be a cutoff saying the meeting starts at 10 and 10:15 is the cutoff, or something along those lines. But then there's also the issue of quorum too, because there is a quorum requirement that's built in as well. But we need to be mindful of that well in advance.
Sounds good. Thank you, Steve. Okay, and with that, it's time to adjourn. Do I hear a motion? I shall move. Okay, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.